The massive alien ships appeared without warning near Neptune. There were 200 of them, each one bigger than anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls were dark metal that seemed to absorb light itself. The ships belonged to the Krell Dominion, an empire that had conquered 47 different worlds across the galaxy. Commander Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of Sentinel-7, an orbital defense platform circling Earth. He watched the sensor readings with narrowed eyes. 20 years in the military had taught him to stay calm during emergencies, but this was something new. These weren't pirates or rebels. This was a full alien invasion fleet, sir. They're broadcasting something, said the communications officer, a young man whose hands shook slightly as he worked his console. Put it on screen, Jake said. The view screen flickered to life. An alien appeared, tall and reptilian with scales that shifted between purple and black. Its eyes were cold and yellow. This was Supreme Commander Vex Thor, leader of the Krell fleet. Primitive species of Earth, the alien said, its voice translated by computers into perfect English. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into the Krell Dominion. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Resistance will result in planetary bombardment. Your technology is inferior. Your military is laughable. Comply or face extinction. The transmission cut off abruptly. For a moment, there was complete silence on the bridge. Then one of the junior officers snorted with laughter. Another tried to hold it in but failed, covering her mouth as giggles escaped. Within seconds, the entire bridge crew was laughing. Jake felt a smile pull at his lips. Laughable? Did he just call us laughable? He shook his head. Get me a line to Earth Command. These guys have no idea what they just did. Down on Earth, in the United Earth Coalition headquarters, Ambassador Lisa Monroe watched the same transmission with a room full of government officials and military leaders. When it ended, someone in the back of the room started chuckling. Then someone else. Soon the entire room was filled with laughter. Lisa couldn't help but smile. She had spent 15 years negotiating with difficult people, but this was a first. Gentlemen and ladies, she said once the laughter died down, I believe these Krell have never met anyone quite like us. Admiral Henry Blake sat at the head of the military strategy table. He was a thin man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. 72 hours, he said with a slight smile. That's adorable. Let's show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. The transmission was broadcast to every screen on Earth and throughout the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. The reaction was not what the Krell expected. People didn't panic. They didn't riot in the streets. Instead, they laughed. Social media exploded with memes and jokes. Someone made a video of the Krell commander with funny subtitles. Another person posted a picture of their cat with the caption, "This face is more intimidating than alien threats." News anchors struggled to keep straight faces while reporting the story. In a coffee shop in New York, people gathered around the TV and laughed together. In Tokyo, students made jokes about the aliens' bad timing. They had exams next week and didn't have time for an invasion. In London, someone spray-painted "Come and Take It" on a wall, and it became an instant tourist attraction. Dr. Peter Hayes sat in his laboratory at the Coalition Research Institute. He was a xenobiology expert, one of the few people on Earth who had studied alien life forms from the handful of species humanity had encountered. He watched the Krell transmission 3 times, taking notes. Interesting, he muttered to himself. They're hierarchical. Rigid command structure. They expect fear and immediate submission. He typed rapidly on his computer. They've probably never encountered a species that responds to threats with mockery. His assistant, a young woman named Claire Bennett who specialized in psychology, leaned over his shoulder. What do you think will happen? Peter smiled. I think the Krell are about to learn a very important lesson about humans. We don't respond well to bullies. In orbit, Jake Sullivan called together his senior officers. All right, people. We have 3 days before these Krell expect us to roll over. Let's make sure we use that time wisely. I want every weapon system checked and double-checked. I want firing solutions prepared for every possible angle of attack. And I want our stealth systems ready to go. Sir, do you really think we can win? Asked the weapons officer. Jake looked at her steadily. Lieutenant, humanity has survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and countless disasters. You think one alien empire scares us? These Krell have conquered other species who probably surrendered at the first sign of trouble. But we're not like them. We fight back. Always have, always will. The lieutenant nodded, her confidence returning. Yes, sir. Admiral Blake initiated Protocol Odyssey, a defense plan that had been developed years ago for exactly this type of scenario. Military bases around the world and throughout the solar system received their orders. Ships that had been under repair suddenly became operational. Defense platforms that looked like ordinary satellites powered up their hidden weapons. On Mars, the colonial government activated its own secret fleet. For years, Mars had been building warships in underground facilities, preparing for the day when humanity might need every ship it could get. That day had arrived. Lisa Monroe sat down to compose Earth's official response to the Krell ultimatum. She thought carefully about every word. The message had to be perfect, confident but not arrogant, clear but not desperate. Finally, she wrote, Dear Krell Dominion, thank you for your interesting proposal. However, we must decline. You see, we have a saying on Earth, and come and take it. We look forward to your attempt. Regards, humanity. She added a winking emoji at the end, then sent it through every communication channel humanity had. Within minutes, it reached the Krell fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, Supreme Commander Vex Thor read the response 3 times. He didn't understand it. The emoji made no sense to him. His intelligence officers couldn't explain it either. Why are they not afraid? He demanded. Every species we have encountered showed fear. They begged for mercy or attacked in desperate panic. But these humans, they laugh. They send strange symbols. What does it mean? His chief advisor, a scarred veteran of 30 conquests, shook his head. I do not know, Commander. Perhaps they are insane. Perhaps they do not understand the threat. Vex Thor stared at the message on his screen. Something felt wrong. His instincts, honed over decades of warfare, told him this would not be as easy as previous conquests. But the Krell Dominion had never retreated, never failed. He could not be the first commander to turn back from a primitive world. Prepare the fleet, he ordered. We attack when the deadline expires. Show these humans what happens when they refuse the Dominion. Back on Earth, in homes and offices and military bases around the world, people prepared, not with fear but with determination. Children went to school. Adults went to work. Life continued normally because that was the message humanity wanted to send. You don't scare us. Jake Sullivan looked out at the stars from his command station. Somewhere out there, the Krell fleet was waiting, expecting humanity to break. He smiled grimly. They were about to learn the most important lesson about humans. When you threaten Earth, humans don't surrender. They laugh, they fight, and they win. The 72 hours began counting down. Admiral Henry Blake stood before a holographic display showing the entire solar system. Red dots marked the Krell fleet's position near Neptune. Blue dots showed Earth's forces scattered throughout the inner system. To anyone watching, it looked like humanity was preparing a standard defensive formation. That was exactly what Blake wanted the Krell to think. How long until they reach Mars orbit? He asked. 48 hours, sir, replied his tactical officer. They're moving slowly, probably expecting us to panic. Blake smiled. Good. The more time we have, the better. Initialize Phase 1 of Protocol Odyssey, and get me Captain Cross. Across the solar system, hidden among the asteroids between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Nathan Cross sat in the command chair of the Shadow Runner. His ship was a stealth frigate, invisible to most sensors thanks to advanced technology that bent light and absorbed radar waves. He had been hunting pirates in the outer system when the Krell arrived. Now he had a much bigger target. Captain, we're receiving orders from Earth Command, said his communications officer. Nathan read the message and grinned. Finally, some real action. Helm, plot a course to intercept those Krell scout ships. Weapons, I want silent running, cold launches only. Let's show these aliens what happens when they ignore the shadows. The Shadow Runner moved silently through space, its engines running cool to avoid detection. 3 Krell scout ships were scanning the asteroid belt, mapping human positions. They never saw the attack coming. Nathan's weapons officer locked onto the first target. Firing. A single missile launched from the Shadow Runner's tubes, its engine cold until it was meters from the Krell ship. Then it ignited and struck the scout's engine core. The ship went dark, drifting helplessly. Target 2 locked, another missile. Another disabled ship. The 3rd Krell scout finally detected something was wrong, but before it could raise an alarm, Nathan's 3rd missile struck home. All 3 scouts were floating dead in space, and the main Krell fleet had no idea what happened. Nice shooting, Nathan said. Now let's disappear before they come looking. We've got more work to do. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Maya Torres sat in a dark room filled with computer screens. She was the best hacker in Earth's military, and she had just accomplished something remarkable. She had broken into the Krell communication network. "Oh, this is going to be fun," she muttered, her fingers flying across her keyboard. She started simple. First, she played an old pop song from the 21st century on every Krell command channel. The song was deliberately annoying, with a catchy chorus that got stuck in your head. Within minutes, Krell officers were shouting at their communications technicians, demanding they stop the music. But every time they blocked one frequency, Maya switched to another. The song played continuously, driving the orderly Krell commanders to distraction. Then she got more creative. She started sending false sensor readings to random Krell ships, making them think asteroids were missiles, or that human ships were in locations they weren't. The Krell fleet's coordination began to suffer as commanders received conflicting information. Supreme Commander Vexthor stood on his flagship's bridge, his scales darkening with anger. "What is happening? Why can't we stop this noise? Why are our sensors malfunctioning?" His chief engineer looked terrified. "Commander, someone has infiltrated our communications network. We're trying to purge the intrusion, but they're too skilled. Every time we block them, they find another way in." "Impossible," Vexthor hissed. "Our systems are military-grade, protected by the best encryption in the Dominion." "I know, sir, but apparently human computer technology is more advanced than we thought." On Earth, Dr. Claire Bennett presented her findings to Admiral Blake and Ambassador Lisa Monroe. She had been studying recordings of previous Krell conquests, analyzing their tactics and behavior. "The Krell are rigid," she explained, pointing to data on her tablet. "They follow a strict military hierarchy. Orders flow from the top down, and lower ranks never question their superiors. This makes them efficient but inflexible. So how do we use that against them?" Blake asked. Claire smiled. "We do things that don't make sense. We break every rule of conventional warfare. We attack when we should defend, retreat when we should advance, laugh when we should be afraid. Their command structure can't adapt fast enough to chaos." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "So we're not just fighting a military battle. We're fighting a psychological one." "Exactly, and we're already winning it. Look at this." Claire pulled up intercepted Krell communications. Their officers are confused and frustrated. They're second-guessing themselves. Some are even suggesting retreat, though Vexthor keeps shutting them down. Blake leaned back in his chair. "Then let's make it worse. I want every unconventional tactic we can think of. Colonel Miller, you're up." Colonel Frank Miller was a broad-shouldered man with a reputation for creative solutions to impossible problems. He commanded the Orbital Drop Marines, an elite unit trained for boarding actions and close-quarters combat in zero gravity. "Sir, my teams are ready," Frank said. "We've been practicing boarding maneuvers for years. The Krell won't expect us to take the fight onto their own ships." "Good," Blake said, "because that's exactly what you're going to do." As the deadline approached, humanity's true preparations became clear. The civilian cargo ships that had been evacuating refugees suddenly dropped their disguises. They were Q ships, heavily armed vessels designed to look helpless. Hidden weapon ports opened, revealing cannons and missile tubes. Orbital defense platforms that appeared to be simple satellites revealed themselves as massive railgun installations, capable of firing projectiles at incredible speeds. The asteroid belt held another surprise. Dozens of asteroids had been hollowed out and filled with weapon systems. From the outside, they looked like ordinary rocks. Inside, they were military bases ready to launch devastating attacks. Jake Sullivan coordinated the defense from Sentinel-7. His platform was one of 50 scattered around Earth and Mars, each one a fortress bristling with weapons. But they also had a secret weapon, networked AI that could coordinate their fire with split-second timing. "All stations report ready," said his tactical officer. Jake nodded. "Then we wait. Let them come to us. Let them think they know what they're facing. And then we show them what Earth really looks like when it's angry." On the Krell flagship, Supreme Commander Vexthor reviewed his battle plan for the 10th time. Everything looked correct. The humans had a decent defense, but nothing his fleet couldn't overwhelm with superior numbers and firepower. The scout ships had gone silent, but that was probably just equipment failure. In the harsh environment of the asteroid belt, all ships report ready for attack. His tactical officer announced Vex's. Thor stared at the image of Earth on his view screen. The small blue planet looked peaceful, almost inviting. It was hard to believe such a primitive world could cause any real resistance. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Show them the power of the Krell Dominion." The massive fleet moved forward, accelerating toward the inner solar system. On every Krell ship, weapons charged and shields powered up. They expected a quick victory, a few hours of fighting before the humans surrendered. They had no idea what was waiting for them. In orbit around Earth, Jake Sullivan watched the Krell fleet approach. He smiled grimly and opened a channel to all human forces. "All ships, all stations, this is Sullivan. Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't kneel to anyone. Make every shot count. Make them remember this day. And whatever happens, make sure they know. Humans don't surrender." "We fight back." A chorus of acknowledgments came back. Throughout the solar system, thousands of men and women prepared to defend their home. The Krell were coming, but humanity was ready, and they were about to learn the hardest lesson of their empire's history. The Krell fleet crossed into the inner solar system with confidence. Supreme Commander Vex Thor watched his tactical display as 50 of his best battleships formed the vanguard. Behind them, another 150 ships waited to exploit any opening. It was a formation that had crushed resistance on 47 worlds. Earth would be number 48. "All ships prepare to fire on orbital targets," Vex Thor commanded. "Show these humans what real power looks like." The massive Krell battleships charged their plasma weapons, energy building in their forward cannons. Green light pulsed along their hulls as they prepared to unleash devastating volleys at Earth's orbital platforms. Then everything went wrong. The space around the Krell vanguard suddenly erupted in explosions. Thousands of small objects that had been floating innocently in orbit revealed themselves as proximity mines. They had been disguised as space debris, looking like harmless chunks of old satellites and discarded equipment. The Krell sensors had ignored them completely. Now those mines detonated in a carefully choreographed pattern, tearing into the Krell formation. Shields flared and overloaded. Hull plating cracked under the assault. 3 Krell battleships lost power immediately, drifting helplessly as their systems failed. "What is this?" Vex Thor roared. "Where did these weapons come from?" Before his tactical officer could answer, new threats appeared on the sensors. Ships were emerging from the asteroid belt, moving fast and firing with precision. These were Nathan Cross's stealth frigates, 5 vessels that the Krell hadn't even known existed. Nathan sat calmly in his command chair, watching the tactical display. "Target their engine cores. I want them disabled, not destroyed. We might learn something from their technology." His weapons officer nodded and fired. Guided missiles streaked across the dark void, each one programmed to hit specific weak points in Krell ship design. 4 more Krell vessels went dark as their engines failed. "Captain, they're starting to target us," said the sensor officer. "Good," Nathan replied. "That means they're not looking behind them." From the opposite direction, a new threat emerged. The civilian cargo ships that had been fleeing toward Mars suddenly reversed course. Their hulls opened to reveal hidden weapon bays. These Q ships had been disguised perfectly, looking exactly like helpless refugees. Now they showed their true nature. Dozens of cannons and missile launchers opened fire on the Krell fleet's flanks. The Krell commanders, focused on the threat ahead of them, were caught completely off guard. Explosions rippled through their formation as human weapons found their marks. "All ships, break formation," Vex Thor ordered. "Engage all human vessels!" But breaking formation was exactly what Admiral Blake had wanted them to do. From Earth's orbital platforms, Jake Sullivan watched the Krell fleet scatter into smaller groups. "Perfect. All platforms, initiate synchronized fire pattern Delta," Jake commanded. 50 orbital railgun platforms fired simultaneously. Their projectiles were simple chunks of metal, but they were moving at incredible speeds. The kinetic energy alone was devastating. Krell shields, designed to stop energy weapons, were far less effective against solid slugs moving at relativistic velocities. 5 more Krell ships took critical damage, their hulls pierced by railgun fire. Supreme Commander Vex Thor couldn't believe what he was seeing. In less than 10 minutes, his fleet had lost 20 ships. The humans were fighting with a coordination and creativity his forces couldn't match. Then things got worse. Colonel Frank Miller and his orbital drop marines launched their assault. Armored drop pods shot from hidden positions on Earth's moon, accelerating toward damaged Krell vessels. Each pod was a small armored capsule containing 4 Marines in powered combat suits. The pod struck Krell hulls with the force of small missiles, punching through weakened armor. Marines poured out, carrying weapons designed for close-quarters combat. They used breaching charges to blast through internal bulkheads, grenades to clear rooms, and their suits' strength enhancement to fight in zero gravity. The Krell soldiers had never experienced anything like this. They were trained for ship-to-ship combat, for firing weapons from safe positions behind consoles. Hand-to-hand fighting in their own corridors was completely foreign to them. Frank led one team personally, his powered suit allowing him to tear through a sealed door with his bare hands. "Move, move, move!" he shouted. "Secure the engine room!" His Marines flowed through the Krell ship like water, fast and unstoppable. The surprised Krell defenders fell back, unable to coordinate a defense against this unconventional attack. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Maya Torres struck another blow. She had been working on cracking deeper into the Krell computer systems, and now she succeeded. With a few keystrokes, she took control of several Krell ships' targeting systems. Suddenly, Krell vessels began firing on each other. Friend or foe identification systems went haywire, marking allied ships as enemies. Vexthor watched in horror as 2 of his battleships exchanged fire, each one believing the other was a human vessel in disguise. "Override! Override all automated systems," he commanded. But Maya was already 3 steps ahead, locking out manual controls and causing weapons to misfire. It was chaos, exactly what Dr. Bennett had recommended. Dr. Peter Hayes, watching the battle from his laboratory, noticed something interesting in the biological data they had collected from Krell prisoners taken earlier. The Krell had sensitive hearing, adapted to their homeworld's thin atmosphere. He ran some calculations and contacted Admiral Blake immediately. "Admiral, I can give you a weapon," Peter said. "The Krell are vulnerable to certain sound frequencies. If we broadcast through their communication systems, we can disorient their crews." "Do it," Blake ordered. Within minutes, a sonic weapon was deployed through the Krell communication arrays that Maya had compromised. A high-pitched frequency, inaudible to humans but painful to Krell, began broadcasting on every channel. Krell officers clutched their heads, unable to concentrate. Some collapsed. Their carefully coordinated fleet became a mob of confused, suffering ships. Vexthor struggled to give orders through the pain in his head. His vision blurred. Around him, his bridge crew was in similar distress. "Cut all communications!" he managed to shout. But cutting communications only made things worse. Now his ships couldn't coordinate at all. They were isolated, alone, facing an enemy that seemed to attack from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then Admiral Blake revealed his final card. The moon's far side lit up with launch flares. A massive ship, larger than any Krell vessel, emerged from hidden construction bays. It was the UES Independence, Earth's secret flagship. For 5 years, it had been built in secret, incorporating every piece of advanced technology humanity had developed. Jake Sullivan, promoted to temporary admiral, now commanded the Independence. He stood on its bridge looking at the scattered Krell fleet through the viewscreen. "Open a channel to the Krell flagship," he ordered. Vexthor's face appeared on screen, his scales pale with shock. "Supreme Commander," Jake said calmly, "you wanted to see our full military capability. You're looking at about 20% of it. Want to keep going?" Vexthor stared at the human commander. Around him, alarms blared. His fleet was in chaos, 40 ships disabled or destroyed, Marines boarding his vessels, his communications compromised, his crews in pain, and now this massive human warship, bristling with unknown weapons, facing him directly. For the first time in his long military career, Supreme Commander Vexthor felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. Jake saw it in the alien's eyes. "I'll give you a choice," he said. "You can retreat now or we can continue. But I promise you, if we continue, you'll lose a lot more ships. We've barely started." The transmission cut off. Jake turned to his crew. "All ships maintain pressure, but give them room to run. Let's see if they're smart enough to take the exit we're offering." Throughout the solar system, human forces pressed their advantage while leaving one clear path open. Back the way the Krell had come, toward the wormhole that led out of Earth's system. The question now was whether Vexthor's pride would let him take it. The battle in Earth's solar system was being watched by more eyes than anyone realized. Across the galaxy, Dozens of alien civilizations had sensors pointed at the small yellow star, where the Krell Dominion was supposedly conquering another primitive world. What they expected to see was a quick Krell victory. What they actually witnessed shocked them all. On the planet Vela Prime, in a chamber deep beneath the surface, rebel leader Kara watched the battle data streaming in from their hidden spy satellites. Her people had been conquered by the Krell 30 years ago. They had been slaves ever since, forced to mine minerals and build ships for the Dominion. "Is this real?" asked her second-in-command, an old soldier named Marcus. Kara nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the display. "The humans are winning. The Krell are losing." She stood up, her voice rising. "If they can resist, so can we. Send word to every cell, every resistance group. Tell them what's happening. Tell them hope has returned." In the Galactic Assembly, a massive space station where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered, chaos erupted. The Assembly had been watching the Krell for centuries, afraid to oppose them. Now they watched as Earth did what no one else had dared to do: fight back and win. Ambassador Richard Kane stood at Earth's small diplomatic post, watching the other ambassadors buzz with excitement and fear. Suddenly he found himself surrounded by alien diplomats, all asking variations of the same question. "How are you doing this?" asked the Thurian ambassador, a floating jellyfish-like creature. "What weapons do you possess?" demanded the Corinthian representative. "Will you help us fight the Krell?" begged the Aldoran delegate. Richard held up his hands. "Please, one at a time." He smiled slightly. "As for how we're doing it, we're human. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. You think one alien empire scares us?" The other ambassadors fell silent, processing this information. Finally, the elderly Thurian spoke again. "Your species fights among itself? And this makes you stronger?" "It teaches us to adapt," Richard explained. "Every war, every conflict, we learn new tactics, new strategies. We never fight the same way twice. The Krell, they follow the same playbook they've used for centuries. That makes them predictable." Meanwhile, on a distant world called Theron, Captain Linda Gray commanded the exploration vessel Pioneer. She had been on a diplomatic mission when the Krell attacked Earth. Now she found herself in an unexpected situation. The Theronians were a peaceful species who had submitted to Krell rule 20 years ago rather than fight. Their world produced food, lots of it, which the Krell needed to feed their empire. But the Theronians had never stopped hoping for freedom. "Captain Gray," said Prime Minister Eldon, the Theronian leader, "is it true? Are your people really defeating the Krell?" Linda nodded. "We're holding our own, sir. Better than holding our own, actually. We're winning." Eldon's large eyes welled with tears. "We thought resistance was impossible. The Krell are too strong, too many." "They're strong," Linda agreed, "but they're not invincible. And here's something they didn't count on. Humanity isn't alone. We have friends now." She looked at Eldon meaningfully. Friends who might want to stop sending food to an empire that enslaves them. Understanding dawned in Eldon's expression. A food shortage would cripple the Krell supply lines. "It would indeed," Linda said with a smile. Back on Earth, Dr. Helen Price published her research paper on galactic networks, and it spread like wildfire. She explained in simple terms why humans fought differently than other species. Most alien civilizations had evolved on worlds where cooperation was essential for survival. They naturally formed unified societies with clear hierarchies. Humans were different. Earth had multiple continents, diverse environments, and isolated populations that developed separately. This created competition, conflict, and constant innovation in warfare. By the time humanity reached space, they had thousands of years of military experience that most alien species simply didn't have. "We're not more violent," Helen wrote in her conclusion. "We're more experienced at violence. And when you threaten us, we don't break. We remember every lesson we learned fighting each other, and we use it against you." The paper was translated into dozens of alien languages. It was discussed in academic circles across the galaxy, and it terrified the Krell Supreme Commander Vexthor had called for reinforcements after the disastrous first engagement. Now 100 additional Krell warships were arriving through the wormhole. He stood on his repaired flagship, watching them form up with his remaining vessels. "With these reinforcements, we outnumber the humans 3-1, his tactical officer reported. Vexthor nodded, but he felt no confidence. Something had broken in his certainty. The humans had shown capabilities his intelligence had never predicted. They fought in ways the Dominion had never encountered, and they showed no fear at all. "Commander, we're receiving strange reports from our occupied worlds," said his communications officer. "There are uprisings, rebellions. The conquered species are fighting back." "What?" Vexthor turned sharply. "Where?" "Vela Prime, Theron, Eldora. 12 worlds so far. They're saying that if humans can resist, they can too." Vexthor felt something cold settle in his stomach. This battle wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about the entire Dominion. If he lost here, if he retreated, the Empire would crumble as every conquered world rose up in rebellion. He had to win. There was no other option. On Earth, Admiral Blake received intelligence about the Krell reinforcements. He gathered his commanders for another strategy session. "They're doubling down," he said, studying the tactical display. 100 new ships. "They're committed now." Jake Sullivan, still commanding the Independence, spoke up. "Good. The more they commit here, the fewer ships they have to put down rebellions elsewhere. Did you see the reports? 12 worlds are rising up. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to free the galaxy." Colonel Miller grinned. "Then let's make sure we put on a good show. These new Krell ships need to learn the same lessons we taught the first ones." Maya Torres cracked her knuckles. "I've been working on something special. The Krell updated their encryption after I hacked them before, but I've already broken the new codes. This time I can do more than just annoy them." Nathan Cross, whose stealth frigates had been rearmed and resupplied, leaned forward. "My people are ready for round 2. We've studied Krell behavior now. We know their blind spots." Blake nodded with satisfaction. "Then here's what we're going to do." He outlined a plan that was even more audacious than before. Instead of just defending, they would go on the offensive. They would split the Krell fleet, confuse it, and destroy it piece by piece, and they would do it in a way that would be recorded and broadcast across the galaxy. "We need to send a message," Blake said, "not just to the Krell, but to every species watching. That message is simple. Humanity stands with the oppressed. We don't bow to tyrants, and we will fight alongside anyone who wants to be free." Lisa Monroe had been working on the diplomatic side of things. She had been in contact with rebel groups on a dozen worlds, coordinating their uprisings with Earth's military actions. Now she had something important to report. "Admiral, the rebels are asking for weapons and training. They want to know if we'll help them." Blake looked at her steadily. "What did you tell them?" "I told them yes," Lisa said. "I told them that Earth remembers what it's like to fight for freedom. And we never leave our friends to fight alone." A slow smile spread across Blake's face. "Then let's make it official. Earth's first act as a free world defending itself will be to help others do the same." The stage was set for the second battle, but this time, it wasn't just Earth against the Krell. It was a growing alliance of free peoples against an empire built on fear. And the Krell were about to discover that fear only works if your enemy believes you're invincible. Earth had shattered that belief. Now the whole galaxy was watching to see what came next. The battle had been raging for 6 days. Supreme Commander Vexthor stood on his flagship's bridge, watching the tactical display with growing desperation. Half his fleet was gone. Half. 300 ships had arrived to conquer Earth. Now fewer than 150 remained operational. The humans were everywhere. Their stealth ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. Their orbital platforms fired with perfect coordination. Their Marines boarded Krell vessels and fought with a savagery that shocked even hardened Krell veterans. And their cyber warfare specialist, that cursed human called Maya, had turned the Krell's own systems against them time and time again. "Commander, morale is collapsing," reported his second-in-command. "Crews are refusing orders. Some ships are requesting permission to retreat. There are even rumors that humans are demons, that Earth is cursed." Vexthor's scales had turned almost black with stress. His empire had never faced defeat like this. In 3 centuries, the Krell Dominion had never lost a conquest. But Earth was different. These humans were different. "We make one final assault," he decided. "Direct attack on Earth itself. Break through their orbital defenses and bombard the planet. If we can destroy their homeworld, we can still salvage this." It was a desperate plan, born of desperation. But Vexthor saw no other choice. Retreat would mean the end of the Dominion. Every conquered world would rebel. Better to risk everything on one final attack. Admiral Blake watched the Krell fleet reorganize for their last assault. He had been waiting for this moment. The Krell were predictable. When cornered, they attacked straight ahead with overwhelming force. It was a tactic that had worked on other worlds. But Earth wasn't other worlds. "All ships prepare for Operation Final Answer. Blake commanded. "This is it. We end this today." Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Independence, positioned directly between Earth and the approaching Krell fleet. Behind him, 40 human capital ships formed a wall of steel and determination. It looked like a last stand. That was the point. "All weapons charged and ready," reported his tactical officer. Jake nodded. "Then let's give them everything we've got." The Krell fleet came on in a massive formation, over 100 ships charging their weapons simultaneously. It was an impressive sight, a show of force meant to break any remaining resistance. Green plasma energy lit up space as they prepared to fire. Then the trap closed. From behind the Krell fleet, Nathan Cross's stealth frigates emerged. They had been hiding in the Krell's own sensor shadow, using the larger ships to mask their presence. Now they struck at the Krell's undefended rear, targeting command vessels and communications arrays. Simultaneously, the asteroid bases that Maya had been quietly repositioning over the past 6 days opened fire. They had been moving slowly, disguised as ordinary rocks until they surrounded the Krell fleet. Now they revealed themselves as heavily armed battle stations, catching the Krell in a deadly crossfire. Colonel Miller's Marines, still aboard captured Krell ships, activated planted explosives at the exact same moment. The ships they occupied had been allowed to rejoin the Krell fleet, appearing to have driven off the human borders. In reality, Miller's people had sabotaged critical systems before withdrawing, waiting for this moment. A dozen Krell ships exploded from within, their engines overloading in carefully planned cascades. Maya struck her final blow. She had been patient, slowly working her way deeper into the Krell fleet's central tactical network. Now she uploaded a virus that didn't just cause malfunctions, it completely crashed the network. Every Krell ship suddenly found itself isolated, unable to communicate with the fleet or coordinate their attack. In the chaos, Admiral Blake gave the order. "All ships, full offensive. Show them what Earth looks like when it's done playing defense." The Independence led the charge, its massive guns firing in perfect synchronization. Behind it, the human fleet surged forward. No defensive posture anymore. This was an attack, aggressive and unrelenting. The Krell fleet, surrounded, confused, and without coordination, began to break. Ships tried to flee but ran into human ambushes. Some attempted to fight but were overwhelmed by superior tactics. Others simply shut down, their crews giving up in the face of impossible odds. Jake Sullivan targeted Vexthor's flagship personally. "All batteries, concentrate fire on that command ship. Let's end this." The Independence's weapons spoke as one. Railgun slugs, plasma torpedoes, and beam weapons hammered the Krell flagship's shields. They held for a few seconds, then collapsed. The next volley struck hull armor, tearing through it like paper. Vexthor watched his bridge fill with smoke and sparks. Alarm screamed. His crew was panicking. He had lost. For the first time in Krell history, they had been completely, utterly defeated. He made the hardest decision of his life. "All ships," he transmitted on emergency channels, "retreat. Fall back to the wormhole. Retreat." The remaining Krell ships needed no further encouragement. They broke formation entirely and ran, pursued by human fighters until they crossed beyond the solar system's edge. Earth had won. On Earth, in the United Earth Coalition headquarters, the command center erupted in cheers. People hugged each other, cried, and laughed with relief and joy. Admiral Blake allowed himself a small smile before giving orders to stand down from battle alert. Lisa Monroe immediately began broadcasting messages to the galaxy. She wanted everyone to know what had happened here. "To all civilizations watching," she said, her voice calm and clear, "Earth stands free. We did not seek this conflict, but we finished it. To those living under oppression, resistance is possible. You are not powerless. To would-be conquerors, humanity is not your prey. We are not your subjects. We are not afraid. And we will stand with anyone who fights for freedom. Remember this day." The message reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. On Vela Prime, rebels stormed Krell facilities and drove out their occupiers. On Theron, Prime Minister Eldon announced his world would no longer provide food to the Dominion. On a dozen worlds, the same story repeated: uprisings, rebellions, declarations of independence. The Krell Dominion began to crumble. In the Galactic Assembly, Ambassador Richard Kane found himself surrounded by alien diplomats seeking alliance with Earth. Some wanted military protection, Others wanted to learn human tactics. Many simply wanted friendship with the species that had broken the Krell. The Assembly formally recognized Earth as a sovereign power and invited humanity to join as a full member. Richard accepted on behalf of Earth, knowing that this was the beginning of a new era. Back on Earth, Admiral Blake retired from active service. In his final speech to the military, he said something that would be remembered for generations. "We won because we're human. We adapt, we improvise, we laugh in the face of fear. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. One alien empire never stood a chance. Never forget what we are. Never forget what we can do when we stand together." Jake Sullivan was promoted to full admiral and given command of Earth's new deep space exploration fleet. His mission was to venture beyond known space, to explore and to ensure that no threat ever caught humanity unprepared again. Nathan Cross received a classified assignment, training rebel forces on liberated worlds in unconventional warfare. He would spend the next years teaching others the tactics that had beaten the Krell Torres, became head of Earth's cyber warfare division, now considered the most advanced electronic warfare force in the galaxy. Alien governments paid enormous sums just to learn from her. Colonel Miller trained the next generation of orbital drop marines, who were already in demand as instructors on allied worlds. Dr. Peter Hayes and Dr. Helen Price continued their research, now with access to dozens of alien species who wanted to understand and be understood by humanity. Lisa Monroe stayed on as Earth's chief diplomat, now with the weight of a military victory behind every negotiation she conducted. On Earth, life returned to normal surprisingly quickly. Children went to school. Adults went to work. Cities bustled with activity, because that's what humans do. They endure, they adapt, and they keep moving forward. A school teacher named Karen Hughes stood in her classroom with her students. When a journalist asked her what she thought about Earth's victory, she smiled and said something simple. "This is Earth. Someone tried to conquer us. They failed. We don't want war, but we won't accept chains either. Tell the galaxy humans protect their home. Always. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have lessons to teach and a future to build." Her words, broadcast across the galaxy, became Earth's unofficial motto. Simple, direct, and very human. The Krell Dominion retreated to its core territories, diminished and humiliated. They would never forget the species from the small blue planet that refused to kneel, and the phrase spread across the stars, repeated by free peoples everywhere. Aliens ordered Earth to surrender. They threatened, but humans only laughed. It was a reminder that freedom isn't given, it's fought for. And humanity had just taught the galaxy that some species will never stop fighting for it. The stars were no longer an unknown frontier. They were humanity's next home. And the galaxy would never be the same.